Okay, so this is our next pocket. This is called a Bluff pocket, which meaning that it doesn't have any top stitching on it, and it has rounded corners at the bottom, which are like that's the tricky bit to do. And I haven't stitched the hem down at the top here, so there's really no stitching on it at all except for the bar tacks here. And if they were in red, you wouldn't see them anyway. So I've made up the pocket. So this is the pocket pattern. With the curves, 1 centimetre seam allowance around the outer edge, 5 centimetre hem at the top, and then I've made a template, and the template is literally cutting off the hem and cutting off the seam allowances. So then I cut out the fabric, and then what I did was just take the template to the iron and just have it so that's the good thing about having this pressed fold at the top. If you do that first, then you can sit the template into that crease, and that gives you a bit of a foundation. And then you need to get the iron, and you need to iron around the curve, so you've got a nice crisp curve around there and up to the top. And then that top edge will be folded under anyway. So once that's pressed in place, then we need to stitch the pocket onto the garment. So here, so that I've got a few more reference points, I've actually put 4 dots on here. So the top 2 dots are 5 mil in and down from the corners of the pocket, and the other ones are just where the pocket starts to go into the curve, just to give it a bit of a nice definite point there to follow. And again, like line this up, and then you can pop a pin, a couple of pins in there. Okay, well, that's pretty good. Are you happy with that? And now we're going to do a pin stitch. So we can make this stitch a little bit longer, so I'm maybe going to turn it up to 3.5, because we'll be pulling this stitch out eventually.
This is just holding it in place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nice long machine stitch that's easy to unpick.
Yep. It doesn't matter if you go over the edge now and again with this either, because we just said we're going to be pulling it out anyway. So just watch your curves, make sure that's sitting nice and flat there. You could clip in around that curve if you wanted to, but
you don't do that if you really need to.
Yeah.
It's just going to weaken.
And remember too, we're doing this with calico, which isn't particularly forgiving. So if you were using a nice a wool suiting or something, that curve yeah, exactly, and the curve would look softer than it was, whereas in the calico you can literally see every little step along the way. Alright, now here's the fun bit. So we've got that stitched in place, but we need to not be able to see the stitching on top. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go inside the pocket.
Oh, you're going to change your stitch length back too, aren't you?
Oh, yes I am. Thank you, Libby.
2.5.
It's 2.5. Now, if I want to do it like this one here, which has got a bit of a gap there, so it really does look like it's hovering over the jacket, we can do that by using a foot width from the edge. So we just put this side of the foot into that little crease that we've created by
So stitching halfway.
yeah. But it's really important for you to follow this edge here. So always keep the edge of your foot in that little groove there.
It gets a bit tricky on the corners, doesn't it?
It does get a bit tricky on the
Impossible.
corners.
And it's really hard to get in there. But yeah, so you've got to be able to really control the fabric and make sure that haven't got stuff punching up underneath the foot.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got no pleats forming around the curve or something. Remember too, this is my way of doing this pocket because you don't have to do any hand sewing. If I were you, I'd give it a go. If it didn't work, I would literally hand sew the pocket on. And I think I've already created a problem under there.
You can still top stitch it and unpick that after.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, top stitch it to get a nice sharp edge, hand stitch it in place. If you're hand stitching it, I do the hand stitching from the outside anyway, or from the back, like, just do it where it's least likely to be seen. Now, this is probably the third one of these that I've ever done, so
It's not getting any easier, is it?
no, not just yet. I think if you were doing production and you were doing a couple of hundred of these a day, you would probably become very good, but I'm certainly not at that level. And also too, I think, if you had a thicker woolen fabric, it would be more forgiving than the calico around the curves. The other thing you could do is stitch, like do the inside stitching, like down to here, and then start again along here. And oh my goodness!
It's worked well, hasn't it?
Oh wow!
No catches. So usually do you get some catches?
Yeah. I thought for sure
So it
that I
does
was
get
going to have.
easier.
I thought this was going to be under here like this, and there'd be big tucks and everything.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
gosh.
worked out well. So it does, obviously
Wow.
it does get easier.
Well, yes. But yes, having this guide, like that groove to show you, certainly makes a big difference. The other thing you could do with this too is that I've sewn it at 6 mil from the edge. And so, we do have quite a big gap there, which means that, and you can actually see it there's the edge of the seam allowance underneath, and that's where the stitching is. If you were worried about, getting too close to that raw edge on the inside, one thing you could do is overlock it. Another thing you could do is make that seam allowance 1.5 rather than just the 1 centimetre. Especially if you're working with a chunky fabric, because seam allowances just sort of seem to disappear in that. I won't unpick all of this,
Yeah,
but you can see how, and the good thing about doing that original row of stitching too is that you get a nice crisp edge, so when you press it, it's nice and sharp, so when you unpick it and get it to this point, a lot of the work's done. Actually, I just noticed that there, oh look, there's a little hole there. Yeah, so I got a little bit further away, but I think also too that's because around that curve the seam allowance was a little bit smaller than the 1 centimetre.
I guess you could put a plain zipper foot on and get in a bit closer.
Which that's that's true. Yeah.
Right. And that way you're probably getting a lot closer to that.
Yeah. So what Libby's saying is, put this zipper foot on.
Yeah.
When you pull
And
this
then line
back
it
and
up.
start sewing, that means you're actually getting the stitch
You're getting
line
a lot
here
closer. Yeah.
rather than all the way
Yeah,
over
yeah.
there.
I think that would
So
work well.
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll help you control that, because again, you're having to manipulate the distance between here and where the stitch line actually is. So if your stitch line's going to be way closer to the original stitch line, then it's going to be a lot easier to do. So
So give that a
anyway, something to have a play with, but ultimately, if it's really not working for you, press it up, press the edges under. You could line the pocket as well, and then hand stitch it in place. Okay.